we have Leighton Batiste with the SIAC. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Leighton Batiste. I am the Associate Commissioner of Marketing and Partnerships for the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, or SIAC, or as I like to say, SIAC.
And super dope, super dope. So Leighton and I had worked together when I was in graduate school back at Georgia State. I was a graduate assistant for the athletic conference. Super dope experience, got to travel and just kind of see the HBCU experience. I personally did not go to HBCU, but it was super dope to be involved in like the atmosphere. Like it was definitely different. So you want to go ahead and tell a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I'll start kind of with my background. I'm originally from Riverdale, Georgia, and I started saying Riverdale just to be specific. I think everyone says Atlanta, but I think it's worth saying exactly where in the metro area you're from. And I'm a graduate of Morehouse College, class of 2018. I started working at HBCU Sports because I grew up in it. My parents are both Southern University alums, and I like to start bragging on Southern, even though I didn't go there. I brag on Southern because they're a public HBCU, and in most states, public schools are under the state university system. But Southern is the only HBCU that runs and manages, funds their own university system. They have their flagship in Baton Rouge, and they have additional campuses in New Orleans and Shreveport, as well as a laboratory school. So I think that's really dope. And I only bring that up because since I went to Morehouse, in the HBCU landscape, people only tend to talk about, Morehouse, Spelman, Howard, but I think it's important to talk about what the additional HBCUs do, because each school does their own thing that the other doesn't. And it's like, oh, okay, I see where your esteem comes from. Yeah. While I was at Morehouse, I was in the band. I played trumpet, and that's the beginning of how I got into this space. Of course, growing up on Black college sports, going to Morris Brown games, going to Southern games. My summer going to sophomore year, I decided to make the logo for the band. And it just so happened in that same summer, myself and a couple classmates from Morehouse and Spelman, we created a student section called the Turnt Tigers. And it's funny because I didn't want the name originally. I actually wanted to name us House Havoc, but I was being very I guess I was treated as the president. So I was like, you know what? Of course. Let me not be this dictator or whatever. We'll go with what works for everyone. And so we chose the Turnt Tigers. I'm glad we chose it. And but my main role was I was designing all the promotional material. So we started putting out the flyers, and it just so happened that my boy who was on drumline had great connections in the athletic department, and they were like, "Hey, who is this guy? We want to work with him." And it was really simple. Once I got put on with the athletic department, it was okay. Look, the block M is for these sports, and the tiger striped M is for these sports, but essentially you've got creative freedom, and that was huge because I had always growing up studied like the graphics, the user experience of professional teams, college teams, and I'm talking globally, not just US sports, all of their websites. I'd watch all the videos, and I realized in the creative space, as far as the marketing, the design, there was a difference as far as effort for HBCUs compared to anyone that's not an HBCU. I'm talking even high school programs are like better. And so I was like, okay, this is cool. And I'm doing it, for Morehouse. And then that spring semester, a little bit of transparency here, y'all. Like, I didn't have the greatest of GPAs in college. So, but I knew that, I knew that
felt.
Oh yeah, I knew that by that summer, I'm about to go into, junior year, I need to have an internship. So I shot a cold email to my current boss. And it was just transparency. Look, I just really want to work in sports marketing, especially with HBCUs. And it was funny because we played phone tag, but when I finally got on the phone to do the interview, it was the morning after day one of Miami spring break, and I was on South Beach, and I'm on the phone doing this kind of introduction. And so, yeah, it was worth it. And I'm here now. I grinded throughout college. I intern. I did a brief, I worked as a stadium employee for the Atlanta Braves. I helped Morehouse with their NCAA tournament. If you go look at their athletic website now, I designed that when I was a student. So there was a lot of work that I did on campus. And yeah, it just set me up for where I am now. So yeah, I'm just very appreciative of everyone that took a risk on me in my not so appealing GPA. And I'm here now.
GPAs really don't matter. Like,
know.
especially as I got older, I started to realize like you really like GPA is just kind of like a social construct in my mind. Like,
Yeah.
especially like you're so dope, like creatively. Like
I
I just
appreciate it.
and then when you said that you did your interview the day after spring break with Commissioner, I can only imagine. For y'all that don't know Commissioner, that's that would not be an easy task.
Oh no, it wasn't. It wasn't. And it was funny because I mean, he was honest with me. He was like, man, the graphic work you sent over, man, it's really not that good. And I got offended off. I was like, what? Like, hey, it was funny. Like I pulled a real Denzel moment in my head. I was like, man, ain't nobody doing nothing like me out here. Like I got real, but shout out to my sister. My sister humbled me, and she was the one that kind of put me and was like, hey, look, like at the end of the day, put yourself in his shoes. He's where you want to be. And I was like, all right, good point. So in between that time, I had designed more material. So when I finally met in person for an in-person meeting, I had new material. He was like, why didn't you send me this before? And actually, it was a mixture of new material and material I had already made. And instead of, I had nitpicked. So I chose what I thought he would like. And in this, when I came up in the interview, I had just some new stuff. He was like, see, this is the stuff. This is good. And that's when I got the internship. You know, I was a marketing intern, and that was like my first lesson. You know, amazing. Keep going. Sometimes the first thing you submit isn't the right thing, but just keep going.
Yeah, I think that is a great lesson. Like sometimes you have to be humble, and it's like, okay, because you think you're doing so good, and somebody's like, yeah, nah, that ain't it.
So hot, my boy.
Run that back. So that's definitely super dope. And so when we talk about Commissioner, so I went to Mizzou, you know, which is PWI. I wasn't really involved with sports when I was in undergrad. So can you talk more about like the Commissioner and like the setup of HBCU athletics?
Yeah, so I mean, the setup of HBCU athletics is similar to any league, right? And I really like to compare it to the pro sports. Your commissioner is hired by the president. So look at the presidents in college sports like the owners. So you have this league of schools, they come together, they say, look, we want to have a separate staff of people who are going to help manage our league, and beyond just events. When you get on the highest of levels, so you went to Mizzou, so you went to an SEC school, like shout out to y'all.
Big 12 my freshman year. Either right before I got there, but we switched, which was a crazy transition too. But sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all good because even then you were still Power 5. Yeah. So it was like on the highest of levels, you know, your staff is not only managing events, but they're literally responsible for getting the brands of every school in the conference on the biggest stages, getting, you know, biggest partners, as many spaces as possible, you can get the brands, the license of these schools to help monetize, which helps with resources. That's what you do. So we have a conference staff. Our bosses are essentially the presidents, and then our colleagues are really the athletic directors at the school. So we have to work with the ADs, figure out, okay, what are the needs of the campuses? Not only what are the needs of the individual campuses, but what's going to benefit the league as a whole, which is tough because for the listeners, we're Division II. So when you're on D2, of course, everyone's always looking up instead of looking around. So you kind of always have to, you're in this tough position where at the end of the day, those you're working with, you know, there might be some that are thinking, how do I move up?
That's really good.
Yeah, to D1. Like, how do I move up to D1? And it's interesting because we're living in a space where through social media, through just proper alliance, and just if you do it the right way, you really don't have to move divisions to monetize, to really build something that generates a pool of money for you all to build whatever you want. Because also you might end up losing control as you join other tables, right? You know, you've built something over the years that you have a piece in, you have a word in, you move up here, you might lose some of that stuff, some of that control, some of that input. And so that's basically what we do. And of course, we're responsible for making sure there's a championship event for every sport. We manage, media rights. So making sure that our teams are broadcast. And, this year was groundbreaking because we announced a new extended partnership with ESPN that went from having 5 of our games on the ESPN Plus and ESPNU platforms to 20 of them. But it ended up being like 22 because there were, I think 2 additional games that were managed by ESPN that involved our conference.
So, sorry, not to interrupt, but
go
why
ahead.
is that important? Like, why is that important to go from 5 to 22 or 23?
It created more exposure for our schools. So I could sit there and say in the 20 games, every single one of our schools, even our new members, we added 2 schools to bump our membership up to 15, which I think that totals 14 or no, I think about 13 football playing programs that we have, right? When you only have 5 games, right, that's technically 10. If you were to do, maybe my math is off. Yeah, I think that should be 10.
Yeah.
You should have 2 different schools. Sorry, y'all. 2 different schools in 5 games, but that's not the case. I mean, you might have some schools who have the biggest games and it's reoccurring. So, for example, you might in that mix of 5 see Albany State 3 times, and then they'll probably play Tuskegee, who might have 2 games in that 5. But by having 20 games, we were able to get each of our football teams on ESPN Plus, which appeals to each fan base. Because every conference has their top brands. Like the reason why it was a big deal for Texas and Oklahoma to leave the Big 12, because those are they're the big dogs. So now as we look at this new Big 12, who's the new big dog? Will it be Cincinnati? If Cincinnati does well in the playoffs this year, will they come in year 1 of the Big 12 and they're the big dog, or will it be Baylor? So for us, our top big dogs are usually Morehouse, Tuskegee, Albany State, of course, Miles College, who's even Albany State won the conference this year, but Miles has been dominant.
I remember from when I was working with you guys.
Oh yeah, very dominant program. But of course, our goal is always, well, how do you get Benedict on TV? How do you get Lane College? How do we appeal to Kentucky State, Central State fans? I really do think that as a staff, we care a lot about equity. And just creating a space for everyone to be seen, every fan base to feel like they have a part of the conference. We don't want our conference to feel like it belongs to just one school. How do we create that for everyone? So that's really it.
That's so good. And I feel like there's so much to unpack with that. So there's 2 parts that I want to say with that. So when you were speaking on how to get Lane College or Benedict College on TV and stuff like that. So with me being from Missouri, we only have less than 5, maybe, if that, HBCUs in the Midwest region. And so I remember visiting Lincoln University when I was in 4th grade. But I feel since I didn't see it as much as Mizzou or see it as much as KU and stuff like that, I kind of was more so prone to go to Mizzou because I saw it on TV. I saw it in the stores and stuff like that. And so with the smaller schools, do you think that beats a network like BT broadcasting the games again, because I know they used to back in the day, do you think that would be beneficial, or do you think that would not be good, or what's your thoughts on that?
So okay, I'll give you my answer, and of course I had to break down my answer. My initial answer is no, and that's only because I wonder, and I don't know where the stats are, what is the percentage of people that are actually engaging and watching BET content?
I thought about that too.
And right now, I think it's kind of a slap in the face to platforms like HBCU Game Day or to Aspire TV, who in the midst of people in the midst of the top networks not wanting to cover Black college sports, they kept doing it. And I understand why BET stopped. I mean, you had low attendance at games and you had low viewership. Yeah, I mean, that's really what happened over time. And you can't blame a company for saying, look, although we cherish this property, we have to move in a direction that's going to benefit us. We have to drop this property. And so I think instead of trying to rebuild something that happened in the past, why not just get it in the spaces that are already prepped and ready to broadcast it now? One of them is ESPN. ESPN has put a lot of investment in picking up Black college games. But I think that you also have to look at platforms like, again, HBCU Game Day, and then those ancillary podcast platforms like Off Script or Cut Day Sports, which are HBCU specific, because it's not just about watching the game. What happens on the professional level and even on the highest level of college football, the average fan isn't watching 2 or 3 full football games. They might watch the full game of their one team.
Yeah.
And then they keep up by watching the highlights of the other games.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the biggest things I always felt like Black college sports was missing, was everyone doesn't have the time to probably sit down and watch every single HBCU game.
Mm-hmm.
But what's missing is there's no one that's taking the game and creating condensed highlights for people to catch up. And then all these YouTube channels started doing it. And so now you really kind of don't have an excuse to not know at least what happened in the MEAC and the SWAC. I know even with our football games, people were creating highlights or at least posting the entire game out there. Yeah. So it's like, I get it. I know that sometimes we want to try to relive the glory days, but I think that media has evolved. I think platforms have popped up that are better equipped as well. And they're also ran by individuals that truly come from the space. These are folks who built their careers reporting, engaging, building the relationships with HBCU administrators. Because think of it, like, what would Stephen A. be if he didn't have the relationship with NBA players that he does, or NFL players?
Facts.
He wouldn't have the commentary, because it gives him that insight. So you kind of wonder, will the folks at BET have that, or will they be coming in like, we're the big bad network and we'll cover this, and now you're watching and they mess around and call I don't know, they mispronounce one of our school's names, and that'll really throw a program. Fans will be upset when you do that. So yeah, I tried to pick a school and I couldn't think of one. I was like, I can't think of one whose name I could mess up. So
that's dope. I didn't even think about that. Like I said, coming from like a PWI and then to work, even Georgia State is a PWI. So, and then to work with HBCUs, it was a totally different experience. Like, y'all really take pride in like y'all school, the history, and just all of it. It just was dope. Like, I was like, wow, I really feel like I missed out. Like, I'm upset that I didn't go to one, but again, it's more so with the exposure and stuff like that. So I do agree with you. I thought about that, like, as far as like, okay, I guess it would make sense for BET to broadcast the games because it's the Black Entertainment Television Network, whatever. But then I'm like, well, the things that they're airing, like, do people even watch BET like that anymore? Does this make sense? Or, for ratings, are more people gonna try to stay at home to watch the game versus like actually going to the games? Like, it's so many factors into that. And then you also mentioned like the SWAC and then the MEAC and stuff like that. Can you talk more about that and like basically what it is compared to the SIAC?
Yeah. Yeah, this is perfect. So it's funny how, like, when you talk to the average person, they're like, man, our HBCUs, man, we need to be D1. We need to be D1. And it's funny because it's as if people look at the NCAA and they say, all right, D1, D2, D3, HBCU. And it's like, nah, fam.
1,000.
There are Division I HBCUs. There are Division II HBCUs. And even, I don't think there are any D3. I know there's some NAIA. And for those that don't know, NAIA is the secondary association that manages college sports. So you have the NCAA, NAIA. MEAC and SWAC, again, they're D1. That includes schools like Jackson State, Alabama A&M, FAMU, Bethune-Cookman, Southern, Grambling. I can name the whole conference, as you can see. MEAC, you're looking at South Carolina State, Norfolk State, Howard, Morgan, Coppin State, Maryland Eastern Shore. So those are the D1 leagues. On Division II, you have SIAC and the CIAA. So when you look at CIAA, Johnson C. Smith, Fayetteville State, Bowie State, Winston-Salem State. And of course, there's more schools, but just to give y'all a sense of who's in there. And then the SIAC, Tuskegee, Morehouse, Clark, Atlanta, Albany State, Savannah State, Central, Lane, Kentucky State. Again, we have 15 schools. So again,
okay, plug it in there.
Yeah, I could literally sit here and name you. I think I still struggle with, and I'm really working on this, being able to list every school in the CIAA. Once I get it, I think I can list every conference. I can do the Power Five, but yeah, I want to be able to do that.
Amazing. Yeah, again, that just was super dope, like learning about, the conferences and like, oh, there are D1 HBCUs or D2 and D3. Because I feel like, going to a big school like Mizzou, I had a lot of friends in athletics, whatever. And I feel like a lot of them had the red shirt or they came to Mizzou and couldn't play, but they were promised certain things. Because, like a lot of the times these big schools are going to, impoverished communities, or like, the Black schools, or low income neighborhoods to get these students. And then you get all the way to this big school. Nobody essentially like really cares about your education, or if you're going to practice or whatever. And so a lot of times you just sit on the sidelines, you don't get playing time. Now your whole career is just like, what happened? But it's so like, oh, D1, Mizzou's D1, OKU's D1, but like you could have had a better experience, potentially at an HBCU that's also D1 or D2. And you don't have to be D1 to go to the pros and stuff like that. So with talking about that, you know what I'm about to ask about, the high profile recruits coming to HBCUs. So like, what are your thoughts about that? And you know who else I'm going to ask about, but go ahead.
I mean, why would you not be happy about high profile recruits coming to the schools, right? I mean, I don't think that's any kind of like slap in the face to the athletes that are already there. There are so many football programs in America. I would almost argue that America runs on football. Like
1000%.
You're not, if you don't make it in D1, there's a plethora in D2. There's a plethora in D3. If you don't make it, you have 3 additional divisions in NAIA. If you don't work there, you have JUCO to fall back in to just circle back and back up in college football. And then once you graduate, I mean, come on, we're looking at the USFL launching again in April. Like there's always a way for you to play football. And if it doesn't work there, you can go Canadian, you can go European now. Like, but it's all funded. It's all kind of built off of the multiple football opportunities in America. I think it's huge, and I think it's doing for our programs what it does for any other program. It's, it's not that, Alabama wouldn't be what they are today without their high profile athletes.
Exactly.
Granted, that's no knock on, all the championships and success that Bear Bryant had there. But when we talk in the modern day, I mean, it means something for a kid to walk those halls and they see Heisman winners like, Devontae Smith and Mark Ingram and now Bryce Young on the wall. And then to see others NFL, Pro Bowlers and superstars, future Hall of Famers like Julio Jones, like it means something because it tells them that, hey, they made it here, I can make it out of here too. And the thing with HBCUs, it doesn't have the same impact when you're only giving them names of guys that played in the 60s and the 70s. It doesn't.
Facts.
However, I think Sports Illustrated did a great job before this year. They dropped an article that listed all 13 current NFL players that came from HBCUs. And what I thought what was great was that in that 13, they all came from all 4 conferences. So it wasn't like they're all from the SWAC or the MEAC. I mean, you saw guys from CIAA and SIAC, and we're talking active roster. So they're getting paid by the NFL to play, and that means something. So it's like say those guys' names, and unfortunately, I can't say all of them right now. So even I need to be able to do it. But yeah, it's a huge deal. I love it. I think it's great, even with the coaches. We'll get to that. I went to the Celebration Bowl, so I think we could talk about that. But I want to hear what your next question is.
Well, no, because like we were talking about, Travis Hunter committing to Jackson State. And so I know it was like a huge kind of not debate, but we've talked about this. And I know on another like big podcast, they were saying like HBCUs essentially lack talent. And so that's why those kids are not going to the pros and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I know. I'm not gonna.
So here's the thing.
Not gonna name the podcast, but I was like, what? Like,
you can't say a space lacks talent if you're not paying attention to them.
Exactly.
And you can't say a space lacks talent and there's 13 guys who currently hold spots that 13 Power 5 athletes were not able to get in the NFL.
Exactly.
And then it's not only that. I mean, even look at spaces like no one talks about athletes coming out the Ivy League. No one looks at the Ivy League like, oh yeah, sports, whoop-de-whoop. Yet one of the best linebackers on the Atlanta Falcons right now played at Yale. And then I think of guys, of course, my perspective for those who are listeners, my perspective is going to be about the Falcons. But let me explain. We had a DB, Brent Grimes. Like, Brent Grimes played at a Division III school called Shippensburg or whatever. So if he can make it out of there and have a starting spot in the NFL, what makes you think that a guy playing at a Division I or even a D2 HBCU can't? So it's not about there's no talent. What it is it's a space that is actively overlooked. It's not that it's not hidden. It's on TV. And we're in the social media world. You can find whatever it is you're looking for. You're choosing not to look at it.
Exactly.
So I always find those comments very contradictory. And then the day that it happened, I was watching one of the shows, and it really threw me off because it was two Black commentators, two Black guys that were talking about it. And it was like, he's sacrificing his future to be a part of a cause. I was like, what are you talking about?
Sacrificing? Oh,
right.
Jesus.
Yeah, so that's what I was like, what are y'all talking about? Like, everyone knows that at the end of the day, your ability to really go pro is based on your PT. How much playing time did you get? There's scenarios and things that no matter how much practice you go through, if you're at Alabama and you never see the field, no matter how much you practice against other guys at Alabama, you're not prepared to play the game like a guy who played his entire career at a D.
Too.
Yeah, it's like, come on, man. Like,
See,
I just think that I think we find any excuse to try to kind of devalue the space. And then, but shout out to the athletes. They find every way to just continue to prove that, it's different around here. So.
Yeah, that verbiage is dangerous. Like, sacrifice for a cause. Why would you say that?
Yeah.
Then you have other people thinking like, dang, like it's going to be a lack of resources or lack of something if I go to HBCU and stuff like that. And it's like, no, because like I said, most of the time when a lot of, Black athletes go to the bigger schools or PWIs, whatever, they are overlooked. They're like, they don't get playing time or whatever the case may be. Like, they're just not taken care of. And that's no shot to like anybody that went to PWI or players that didn't get playing time, because they do have PT, but at the same time, it's a lot that falls through the cracks too. Well, that's so ignorant to say. Like, oh, that's disgusting.
Yeah, no, it's very detrimental.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. Like, I remember when I was watching Deion Sanders interview on I Am Athlete, and this is before he started coaching, and he was just talking about the future of Jackson State and stuff like that. And he did have some pushback, and I'm like, wow, there's really a stigma like behind this. Which also segues into my next question. Like, what do you think that Coach Prime going to coach at Jackson State, like what did it do? Like, did you see an effect with your conference, and like what's your thoughts on it? Like, how do you feel about it?
It added value to Black college sports overall. Added value to it. And I think what made it more valuable is for him that he didn't shy away from acknowledging like this has to be better. Like, I think one of my favorite videos of Coach Prime was him talking to the equipment staff, and like basically he was like grilling them on how their operations need to be better. But he didn't it was never like condescending. It was more so, a lot of it was, I'm bringing this to attention because we can be better, because this space isn't what everyone says that you are. Like, you can be better. And all it is a mentality thing. And I think that's kind of how every HBCU alum feels. I also feel like that's how Black people as a whole, we feel about our own spaces. It's like, we get it. Yeah, the lack of resources is a thing, and it's real. Socioeconomic issues throughout American history, policies and things that are put in place, those things are real that have really affected our progress. However, there's still a space where it's a mentality thing, and how we treat each other, take care of our spaces, all that. And I think seeing kind of that attention that was going on Jackson State, I wouldn't be surprised if for other HBCUs, it's like, what? All right, man, look, I mean, we get it. Big stadium, sonic boom, cool. But like, y'all ain't got nothing of us. So, I'm going to rep my HBCU too. And Jackson State's like, I mean, but you don't even play. I don't care. I'm going to rep my HBCU. And I think that's kind of, it built more camaraderie. It kind of created this, there's like a dog whistle that said, yeah, don't let Jackson State be the only HBCU that people are talking about.
Exactly.
Get everybody talking about your school. And everywhere, man. I mean, I have to go sit down and really search for the articles that talk about it. But I would love to know what was the overall increase in enrollment across all HBCUs. Because I know there was an increase. I know there was. For sure. I just don't know what the numbers are. But I just think it's very interesting because you don't hear about, if Alabama's successful, no one's writing an article about how the success at Alabama increased enrollment at Southern Cal.
Exactly.
It was like something that happened at one HBCU in Mississippi impacted the enrollment at a HBCU in Maryland. How does this correlate? And of course, I know we have all the other social justice reasons that promoted that. But when a guy like Deion Sanders comes in, he aligns his brand with Jackson State. He's not going to get on TV without having that brand, and he's going to speak positive about the brand.
Exactly.
Yeah, you saw an increase. I know we saw an increase in enrollment. I'm in the SIAC, as you asked. This was probably one of our best years as far as like competition and just parity across the league. It was some of the best football we saw. Both divisions came down to about the last 2 weeks of the season this year. And again, I think a lot of it was, yes, you get that time off from the pandemic, but I would think the intangible thing that we can't connect to data points is that there was some pride on the field that every athlete felt. And I think that was conference wide,
That's dope. Yeah. And with Deion Sanders, like you said, he's going to get on TV, wear a Jackson State shirt or hat, or even like his slogan, the I believe. Now you putting hope into the community. Like, dang, if he believes, and his whole family was behind, Jackson State too. Like, got 2 sons on the team,
right?
Other son, just everybody is like helping to make this work like a family. And I agree that I feel like once Deion Sanders went to Jackson State and you see it everywhere, now I started to see other HBCU like alum like wearing their, their shirts or their hoodies and talk about their schools. And I'm like, this is super dope. I love like the competition. Like, it's not a competition, but it's just like that HBCU pride, or even like, just HBCUs being talked about more in the media. Like, I want to say Michael B. Jordan created like the HBCU like classic or something.
The Legacy Classic. Yeah.
So, and even like Stephen A. Smith talking about it just was amazing to see like the influx of like interest, like, oh, like, what is this? Like I said, I wanted to go to HBCU as in high school, but it just did not, like, I'm the first one in my household to graduate high school. So I did not have the resources to like really look, go visit, understand what it is and understand this and that. So I think that is super dope for Deion Sanders to go to Jackson State and, create that culture or enhance the culture. I'm sorry, I don't want to say create. Don't need people attacking me. Enhance the culture down to Jackson State. And then also, with seeing Hugh Jackson, right, go to Grambling State. Like, what do you think about that?
All right, so for those who don't know, like when I say I'm an HBCU fan, like I went to an SIAC school, Morehouse. I worked for the SIAC, and I'm the baby of the family, so I'm not the first one to go to Morehouse. However, I grew up around SWAC culture, and my team is Southern University. That's my team. So to see this is what I'm saying is like, yeah, there's HBCU pride, but there's still some camaraderie. It was like, all right, man, we just had to deal with the year of really 2 years of hearing Jackson State in the news.
Yeah.
Now we got to hear Grambling in it. Yeah, nah, fam. All right, look. So as a Southern fan, it's like, all right, that's cool and all. I'll see y'all on Thanksgiving weekend. As an HBCU fan, it's great because when you talk about your powerhouse programs of Black college football, just all time, you have to talk about Grambling. And it helps Black college football as a whole win programs like Southern, Jackson, FAMU, Tennessee State, A&T, and Grambling are good because they have the legacy behind them. They have the success behind them. They also have the fan bases behind them. These are big fan bases. I mean, one of the things I found that was interesting is there's a significant amount of people that think that Deion Sanders is the reason why Jackson State put almost 60,000 people in their stadium. But if you're a SWAC fan, you know that anytime Southern or Alcorn travels to Jackson, that stadium reaches that capacity. So it's nothing new. Now, I think it happened at more games throughout the season than normal, but we've always known that Black colleges can fill some of the biggest stadiums. I mean, they put the records out this past weekend. I think you had the Camellia Bowl. No, not the Camellia Bowl. You had the Lending Tree Bowl and some other Group of 5 bowl games. And the Celebration Bowl outdrew all of them by 20,000. I think Celebration had 48,000 people in there. And of all those bowl games, I think the highest attendance was 21. So again, I'd have to go back and look at those numbers, but I know Celebration Bowl outdrew 5 Group of 5 bowl games. So it's nothing new,
And that was at Mercedes-Benz, right?
We're talking Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Crazy.
Right. This is the same venue that hosts the Peach Bowl, the SEC Championship, and 2 HBCUs from South Carolina and Mississippi brought 48,000 people into the venue.
Crazy.
No pre-existing rivalry, none of that. They brought them. I think that's just a really big deal. But I'm excited for Grambling. It's not the same when they're not good. It's probably how every SEC fan feels about Alabama, although they're a little bit harsh. I think they prefer the world without Alabama. But yeah, I just like to see success across the entire landscape. So I'm glad for them.
That's amazing. Yeah, that was super exciting, especially since he had coached some like in the NFL and stuff like that. You know, we talked about like, you know, Black coaches in the NFL and giving them chances or them getting fired super quick and stuff like that. So I'm very excited to see like, you know, what he does with Grambling. And like, what do you think about like what do you think about HBCU athletes and then making it to the pros? Like, what are your thoughts behind that? Like, I know you went to the NFL, why am I blanking? NFL headquarters, I'm sorry, over the summertime. Like, you know, can you tell more about that experience and stuff like that and like your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start with that and answer your first question. So I had the opportunity to represent our conference, went up to the NFL network headquarters, the new one out in LA. So I don't think they had officially opened it yet. But it was great. It was just a great experience to see this amazing facility. I'm not going to lie. When I saw that facility, I immediately thought it'd be amazing if there was a venue like that for all HBCU conferences. Of course, have your own headquarters, but if there was a city we could identify to have some kind of building where we're all in there together, that's ideal. Beautiful facility, you know, although I love the NBA as well, and the NBA has done wonders. You can't deny just how strong the NFL is when it comes to media. It was a great experience just to talk. The NFL, they are intentional in their investment and understanding how they can impact HBCUs, how they can better improve the current partnership, whether it's helping with resources or just additional engagement and just exposure. But it was great because I was the youngest one at the table as well. I was the youngest person in that room. And I'm sitting up there. I mean, we're talking, these are heavyweights for the NFL, and these are some of the most successful and legendary people that have worked in Black college sports. But overall, it was just really good to hear the ideas. Of course, I can't share what was said at the table, but Black college sports is in great hands. And the reason I have to say that is because our growth in the space, like it's interesting how we know that our institutions have not had the resources, yet we still look at those in leadership and we kind of give them this brand of being incompetent. It's like, no, these are the folks who chose to get on the front lines, knowing that the resources were not there, knowing that the support really wasn't there, that the talent pool was essentially taken, right? And yet they still went out there and went on behalf of the conference and fought for the resources, fought, tooth and nail to keep HBCUs relevant. But it was a great experience, and I think that the future of Black college sports is in great hands. I mean, we just have to keep our attention on it. What was the first question again that you had asked?
I got to think about it. I don't remember. So
I got it. I remember. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, you asked about HBCU athletes. Yeah, athletes going to the pros.
Yes.
So I had this opportunity to intern for this other kind of the startup professional league. And what it gave me insight on is the process of getting scouted to go pro on any level is it's not linear at all. It's not. It takes time. You're, of course, on your biggest level of college football is pretty simple for you, right? You play at this big program where all the eyeballs are. If you're someone that they're interested in, on your own campus, you get a pro day where they get to scout you. And then if they really like you, you might also get an invite to now go to their combine, which they created for themselves to scout you. And then you go to their draft. When you're outside of that space, there's so many of these kind of all-star games that are created for college players. So you're playing in these games. That's additional wear and tear on your body before you even really make it to the league. You're talking to all these different scouts. You have agents, and you're grinding, you're continuing to work out. But essentially the point I'm trying to make is that the path isn't as linear as it is for some of your bigger name athletes. Yet the path exists. And I think one thing that the NFL has done a phenomenal job of, and has gotten some criticism from the HBC space, is to sit there and say, we need to create a separate combine for HBCU athletes.
Do you agree with that?
I like it. Here's how I look at it, right? If you had a choice, right? If you had a choice to, so there's a race, and this race awards a champion, right? And the champion gets, let's say you get $5,000, right? But in this race, you have to compete against 100 other athletes to win that $500. And you know that the athletes that run in the first 4 lanes have had years of development, way beyond what you've ever received, right?
Resources.
Right. But then the same organization that hosts that race says, you know what, we'll create you a separate race. You also still get to win $500, but yeah, you get to run the race yourself. The competition is essentially fair for you. Are you going to get upset all because they created you your own same race, even though you're still getting $500 that the other 4, well, really the other, my math is off here, 5, the other 5 runners who don't place first, second, or third in the other race, they never get a chance to see it. Right. So they're in this system where they're running for the same race that they're never going to get a chance to achieve, to even win. And someone went out their way and said, we'll create a separate race for you that helps you get that same goal. That's how I feel about the Celebration Bowl. That's how I feel about separate combines. You can, as athletes, as fans, we can feel like we're getting a special treatment, but that's kind of what we were asking for. And I think you take it. You know, there's been a lot of conversation about the Celebration Bowl of, well, we should still want to go to the NCAA playoffs because you're the national champion. And I'm like, y'all, let's understand what we were saying. We're not able to compete with the biggest programs because of a lack of resources. Right. When you play in the tournament, you're footing the bill of additional games that you as an institution probably did not budget for, compared to a bowl game that has a payout, a guaranteed payout to the participating schools and the conference, in which conferences distribute money back to their participating schools. So even if you don't play in the game, you benefit from one of your own members playing in the game. Right. But how do you really benefit from one of your schools playing in a playoff? And let's say they get in year 1, they lose, and then it takes them 5 years to get past the first round. Then they get to the second round. It takes them an additional 3 years to get past the second round. Then 1 year they finally hit. You're almost looking at 10 years before you can sit there and say, woo, yeah, swag, swag, swag. It's like, no, you don't have to do that. Someone created your table.
I'm sorry to interject. I just think that people are not like, I think I see it from both sides, but I agree with you. I like the idea. I think people are thinking of it as like, oh, we're not good enough to be with the bigger schools and stuff like that. But like you said, it's already all these other schools who's been doing this for years, decades, or whatever the case may be. And so now, like, we're trying to get in that space, but it's just like, we're still going to continue to get overlooked because, I mean, they've been doing this for years. So, you know, they're trying to give you something separate and you can get that exposure and then build it up. Like, I don't think that people want to take that time to like build it up to get to, you know, that space. But I can see it from both sides. But like you said, you got to look at the bigger picture of stuff costs money. And I think money is such a huge factor into getting in those spaces. Like, oh, I remember like when Mizzou, I want to say like my sophomore or junior year, we traveled to Atlanta to play Alabama in the Georgia Dome, I want to say.
Yeah.
And I thought that Mizzou traveled deep and that we were such a big school. Alabama, the whole stadium was red. Like, I was like,
all right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was so overwhelmed and Mizzou's a big school, you know what I mean? So I can only imagine a smaller school. Like, when we want to get in there too, baby, you need to once.
Yeah. And it's like, it's not that it can't be done. So I don't ever want anybody to look at me as being a pessimist. It's more so logical. It's like, why do I have to continue to try to fight over this slice of bread when I could go over here and somebody's allowing me to get my own loaf?
Exactly.
I'm not going to do that. Like,
for sure.
Call it what you want. You can, well, it's not a real national championship. I don't care. I found a way to get my athletes on ABC. Like, we're not talking about the Celebration Bowl is on ESPN Plus. It's not on a local network. We're talking about this game is played on ABC.
Mm-hmm. A national network, right?
Yeah, it's like, come on, man. So that's just how I look at it. I'm very pro Celebration Bowl, very pro having separate combines. I don't know if it needs to be this way forever. Of course, I do think that after a while, look, if we're starting to see 5-star athletes coming out of, HBCU programs, coupled with while they were playing at the HBCU, they beat a couple of top programs, then that athlete should get an invite to the actual combine and should be that's where they can go compete among the rest, among the rest and the best. Like, let them do that there. But I think from the institution standpoint, it benefits everyone to continue to support, something that was created for you to benefit directly.
Exactly. And that's such a great statement to say, for sure. I agree. I'm just gonna leave it at I agree with what you're saying.
I got you.
Because there's so much that I want to say, but essentially I'm going to say exactly what you just said. And so I want to say, like, my last question, and then you can definitely add in whatever else you want to add in, is more so we've talked a lot about football and stuff like that. So what do you think about, like, the WNBA or the NBA or the National Soccer League and stuff like that? Like, how do you feel about, like, those partnerships and, like, that kind of, like, your athletes and professional leagues and stuff?
So I think the new league that I really want to get more invested in is the WNBA. I did get a chance to go to an Atlanta Dream game this year. I'll tell anybody this, and I'm very transparent. It's not that I don't support the WNBA at all. I saw my Atlanta Dream lose 3 WNBA finals within 4 years, y'all. So as an Atlanta sports fan, it's hard. It's hard, but I still support, when they especially when they drop those hoodies, man. Like, I dropped the link in my chat with my boys, and we were like, yo.
Before you go any further, I don't remember what championship we were, like, traveling for, but remember we were, like, talking about, like, the WNBA, and I'm like, all they need is more exposure. And then it's just like, and as soon as those hoodies drop and you see LeBron James in one, or Trae Young and stuff like that, and instantly sold out. Like, I don't think you understand how I felt to see that. And even
I was so happy. And actually, but the hoodies did not make me as happy as Nike creating individual uniforms for each team.
Fire.
Before the WNBA, they were wearing literally the same uniform. The colors were different. And that happened in black college football, where everybody was under Russell Athletic, and Russell had like 3 or 4 templates. And so now you're playing another school and y'all are wearing the same uniform, just the colors are different. That's not cool.
Sorry, I totally forgot that. I'm not sure how many schools did it, but I remember seeing an interview on Deion Sanders. They added their last names to the jerseys.
Yeah, that was
like
huge.
That's super. I don't think people understand how big that is. And I remember Coach Prom saying, like, you pay all this money to go to this school, or your parents and etc. You want to see the names on the back, and plus it's like, who that player is. Like, we don't see the faces or nothing. Like, sorry,
right.
You literally reminded me of that. Okay, continue. WNBA.
Yeah. So, like, well, first of all, names on back. That means something not only to the athlete, but it also means a lot to the family. Even when I played football in high school, our coaches allowed us to earn our names on the back. Like, you had to make so many workouts over the summer. I did that all 4 years. I had my name on the back of my, I made sure.
Okay.
But like, yeah, like, no, that's huge. And so I think what happened with the WNBA, I think it's important to talk about what we saw happen with the NCAA and the women's tournament. It's that it's not, we have to, and when I say we, specifically, I'm talking to the men audience. Although I will throw in this fact, men watch WNBA basketball more than women do.
Facts. That's a fact.
But there's still a large percentage of men who are viewers, and they kind of continue to push this narrative that this is a devalued product. It's not worth watching, and that's not the case. The WNBA is a young league. They're only 25 years old. But even at their 25-year mark, I think I saw an article that they're averaging 1,000 more fans at this age than the NBA did at when they were like in their 20s. And that's huge because the WNBA is also coming up in a time where there's so many different forms of media. So the league can really grow. I think we're also seeing so many platforms like Overtime that's exposing you to up and coming young women basketball players as well. But it was huge for the WNBA. I think it allowed for the WNBA to feel officially like a professional league. It allowed for the fan bases to feel like we have a brand, we have an identity.
Yes.
I mean, imagine how like you're asking these professional women to walk in a city where they have an NBA team, and the NBA team has the luxury of their fans walking around with the jersey on.
Exactly.
And it's like, this is our identity. You know, we are the New York Knicks, but how does the Liberty feel when it's like no one's buying the jersey? But now I get to drop a jersey that fans can wear and it feels like it is ours. You feel like, okay, this city is mine. I'm playing for a real franchise. And as far as women basketball in the NCAA tournament, I mean, you got to let them use the brand March Madness. You have to put them on the biggest stage, because one thing that I found interesting is these schools are going to support the women's program just as much, if not more, than they do support the men's, because at the end of the day, people want to be champions. So any opportunity for my school, my city to call itself a champion, I'm going to support. I don't care what the athlete on the field or on the court looks like. So yeah, Notre Dame men's basketball and Notre Dame football, they're not winning any national titles. And then boom, Notre Dame women's basketball is contending for a national title. The arena's packed out because Notre Dame Fighting Irish fans, they want to be national champions. So I mean, I think it's dope, man. And I shout out to the NBA players for even saying, yeah, we're going to support the league. I think it shut up a lot of those, you know, NBA fans that try to talk down on the WNBA, because you're not going to argue with John Morant. You're not. Come on now. Like,
or LeBron, or even shout out to Kobe, legendary. You know, he was rallying behind the WNBA a lot too, as well.
Right.
And I think and even with, you know, social media platforms like League Fits, and you're posting these dope ass outfits that these WNBA players are wearing. And it's like you said, people want to be a part of an identity. Like, you know, when we follow John Morant or Dwayne Wade or whoever on social media, I want to be a part of your life. I want to feel like I'm in this or whatever. So I think it was, you know, I thought it was super dope to see like these media networks giving them the exposure. And I even saw like the Chicago Sky had like sold out the arena for like their playoff and finals games. And so I was like, this is this is dope. So I really do hope that, you know, the momentum follows into next season and it keeps going. And even like, you know, with HBCU sports, and, you know, it was some dogs in the championships games that I went to. And I'm like, wow, like these girls are really good. So I really continue to hope that everything just continues to the momentum stays up for HBCUs, WNBA, NBA, football, whatever, all that. So that's super dope. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share or get out there or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, for anyone that is listening is trying to figure out, okay, how do I support these, you know, additional leagues? How do I continue to support HBCU football or the WNBA? I like to break it down and say the free things you can do. Follow them on social media. Like, that's just a click of a button. Follow all the platforms. Follow all 4 HBCU leagues again: SIAC, CIAA, MEAC, SWAC. Follow them. Follow the WNBA. You know, go through the followers. If there's any platforms that are covering athletes and what they're doing, follow those platforms and listen. That's the other free thing you can do. Just listen to these conversations, listen to these podcasts where they're talking about the sport. One thing I want to give ESPN and especially the NFL credit for is, excuse me, like, shout out to y'all allowing more women to be commentators and be analysts before games. Like, they know the game. And one of the biggest lessons is, like, you have to get people uncomfortable in order for them to then get comfortable with it. You just have to throw it in their face. So yeah, follow them, listen to the podcast, read the articles. Like, this is the social media era. So if you have any kind of device, you really don't have an excuse to not know really anything, unless you just know it's like, hey, it's just too much for me to follow. But I think it's worth it. Just sit down, you know, go on Wikipedia. One of the things that I did most recently, I've always been a fan of Canadian football, but I had never really sat down to like really understand it. So I watched their Grey Cup, and that's like their Super Bowl basically. But prior to the game, I was on Wikipedia and I read the entire history of how the league was formed. Like, do stuff like that. Go on Wikipedia, just read how the WNBA was formed, or read about how an HBCU league was created.
And why?
Yeah, and why. And then as far as the things you can do that require finances, go to a game, go to a game, buy some gear. If you have the ESPN Plus, Hulu, Disney Plus bundle, watch the games on ESPN Plus,
for sure.
that does benefit them. But definitely watch the games, go to a game. And then the other piece, and this is specifically for those who really want to support HBCUs, donate to your school. Like, even if you're only giving them $10 a year, donate. I've donated in some capacity to Morehouse every year since I've graduated. I found the money to do it. Do it. And then if your HBCU, if you live in another city with another HBCU, donate to that school too. And I look at it because the graduates of that school, they are in some way impacting the community that you're now working in. So, I'm not going to try to preach trickle down economics at all. It's just, it has an effect. Like, it has an impact.
And you're coming from the top saying that too, so but go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like, it has an impact for sure. Like, just make it a priority, save up. I always give simple math. If you put $10 away a month, at the end of the year, you have $120. So that's $120 you can donate back to your school. Keep it that simple. But that's really it, man. I just wanted to give the folks ways that they can support and continue to follow. I don't think there's really any excuse anymore to not know. It just requires being active.
1000%. That was such a great answer. Like, you're so educated. Like, you're
thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So resourceful. But yeah, thank you so much for, hopping on here, having this conversation. I definitely think it was educational, well, more than educational. I learned a lot just listening to you. And I know, like, we used to have a bunch of conversations. I was like, wow, I never thought about that. And, just to see some of the things that we talked about before happening is so dope. But again, like, thank you so much. And I definitely appreciate you coming on.
And no problem. Thanks for having me.